Hello and welcome to the Theological Family Ministry Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping as well as equipping parents as well as children's ministry workers for the discipleship of the children that are in our area of influence. As always, we're hosted by myself, Pastor Anthony Tony Trussoni, the family pastor at Westminster Baptist Church in Westminster, Maryland, and Ben Palaz, who is the family and children's discipleship pastor at Curtis Baptist Church in Augusta, Georgia. Today it will be the second part of a two-part interview with Jared Kennedy, who is the family pastor at Sojourn Community Church in Louisville, Kentucky. We are discussing catechism, specifically the North Star Catechism, and how we can catechize our family, how that form of teaching impacts the children that we have an area of influence upon. So if you have not listened to the first part of this podcast, I encourage you to listen to the previous episode, and you can hear the beginning of our conversation. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy this episode. God bless.
What are some of the unique benefits of teaching through a catechism, and even maybe ones that you think are particular to catechism that maybe other forms of teaching doesn't give you?
Yeah, well, I think catechism gives you, it definitely systemizes your thinking, and so I think it's really helpful. Our school, our children's ministry curriculum we use, teaches the storyline of the Bible over 3 years, and so what our kids are getting in that context is a chronological view of the Bible stories, kind of walking through the scriptures over time. And this is different because it's synchronic, it's across time rather than through time. And so instead of giving you kind of here's an overview of the Bible, the catechism gives you kind of a system of thought, how to kind of systemize this into doctrines. And so I think that's one benefit, is that it gives you themes. Also, it gives you a way to teach definitions of key terms. And so what we really want for our kids is we want them to be biblically literate and theologically literate as they grow older. We want them to be able to open the scriptures and understand what they're reading. We want them to be able to open a devotional book or theology book, and they get to a more technical term. We want them to understand that. And you've given them kind of basic, in the catechism, you give them basic definitions for those terms. You talked about the doctrine of sin a little while ago, that sin is saying no to God and pursuing what I want to do instead of what God wants me to do. That's a basic definition of what sin is, that sets them up to understand kind of like further categories later on. So I think it's really helpful to give this, basic vocabulary for the faith from an early age, that you can build on later on. So educators for the longest time, like Dorothy Sayers said, is really important even before you get into kind of working through the whole storyline and putting that together logically, to get some of those basic concepts in place, some just basic definitions. And she wrote about it. She said even developmentally, before kids are ready to put the timeline in order, they can memorize what the definition of sin is, or the definition of glory, or the definition of salvation. But there's such a deeper understanding that comes then when they're able to put the timeline together too. And so I think both of those types of teaching are helpful, but catechism kind of dials into the thematic teaching and then gives you clear definitions. Third, just practically, it doesn't take a lot of time. You get one flashcard a day. You go over this at the dinner table. We say this question and answer back a few times. We say the verse of the Bible a few times. If you pick one catechism question a week, you can memorize one a week. North Star Catechism has, I think it's 78 questions total. So in a year and a half, you've kind of worked through a large breadth of systematic theology. So I think that's the third thing, is that this is a simple thing. You can put a flashcard on the dash of your car and talk to your kids about it, like while you're in carpool line, or do it at the dinner table, and it's just simple. It's a simple thing that you can take with you. And then the fourth thing I would say is what a framework like this gives to parents is hopefully a basic language that allows you, and this is what I said a while ago about capturing the moments, that allows you to relate life to your theology. And so hopefully that basic language puts you in a place where you can kind of be on the lookout for opportunities to talk about God with your kids throughout the day. And so you've learned little concepts that relate to life, and you can capture those moments as they come, and then leverage those moments to speak to your kids about the gospel throughout all of life.
That's good.
That's really good. This is just a quick follow-up question to that. I mean, some people who know a little bit about your church may say, well, you guys are in the shadow of one of the largest, if not the largest, seminary in the country. You have a lot of families that, the dad's studying in seminary or something. Do you have a lot of families who are not coming from that background? They don't have a theological background and much of a theological grid where this is giving them tools to do that.
Yeah, we do. I mean, I think it totally does. We do have a number of families who don't come from that background. I think it's interesting, like a lot of seminary families come into Louisville, and 2 or 3 years later they're out at another church somewhere. But I've got a lot of long-term Sunday school teachers in our children's ministry who have put down roots locally. They might have taken a class at the seminary here and there at some point, but for the most part, they're not what you would consider to be a seminary family. Mm-hmm. But those families, because they've taught through this Sunday after Sunday for years, kind of have a whole big picture of theology and some kind of clear categories they can go back to. And for those individuals, it's been a big part of their discipleship. It's been a big part of learning, theology, learning to think God's thoughts after Him in many ways. And I found it just to be a really helpful, rather than handing them Grudem, or rather than handing them like a thick systematic theology, what if we walk through 78 questions and answers together over the next year and a half, as you're teaching them to kids in Sunday school. And look, you've got kind of a whole big picture of theology now that, if you want to pick up Grudem or John Frame, more power to you. But it gives them a kind of a basic understanding of how to get in there and relate God's truth to the next generation. Now our guys here planning to be missionaries, planning to be church planners, we're having them read Grudem and Frame too, not just memorize the catechism. Our prayer with the catechism questions is that they're simple enough that and tight enough that the language will really preach, and it gives them almost catchphrases in a way. I mean, that's so like modern and tweetable, but like basically little catchphrases you can go back to, and as you're teaching this to your people, teaching this to someone who's not going to ever pick up that theology book and read it all the way through, but in a digestible way, can work through a holistic view of theology.
That's good.
That's good. All right. So how should an individual use a catechism? And how about a family together? How can a family use a catechism like this?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say individually, and I actually think it's really helpful for if the questions relate in this sense, that if you're a dad or a mom, that I think it's really helpful you to take some time and kind of digest the questions and answers and verses individually before you teach it to your children. So first of all, if you're a dad or mom, read the question and answer, and then look up the verses that go with it, and meditate on that truth and how that truth relates to your life today. Think about the language used in the question, and if there are words there that you regularly use just in your daily life, and how you use it versus maybe how it's defined in the catechism. And then think about how does the Bible use these terms in the verses that are provided there. I'll give you that. So I would say that's first. Think about that devotionally. I would say one question at a time, one question a day or a week is really enough. And then with your family, I think after you've digested that yourself, I would encourage you to, memorize the question and the answer and the Bible verse along with your family, along with your kids. But then also take time to share just your personal reflections about that concept with your kid as well. That doesn't mean you need to, and no one ever needs to do this, but teach a 20-minute sermon at bedtime to your kids. But I mean, take 60 seconds and say, hey, I was thinking about I thought about, the glory of, I don't know, Atlanta Braves baseball, which isn't very glorious right now. But I mean, I was thinking about, how I love the Braves and how proud baseball players are of wearing the name of their team on their jersey. And it just reminds me, like we're image bearers. Like we wear God's glory in us and we show it to the world. And it's something, showing off God's goodness and greatness, showing off God's glory should be something we're really proud of, the same way that, you might be proud to wear the jersey of your favorite team. And so I think something really simple like that, and then memorize it together, pray with your kids, and you can be done. Maybe you're also reading a story to them that night or something else. But I think that would be kind of the first thing with your family. But I think if you think about how does this personally relate, what's my personal reflection about this, it'll help you. I don't know, kids, stories are really memorable for children, and so you can share your personal reflection, and it'll help them remember that as they're memorizing, and then it'll set you up well to connect it to those life moments the way I've been talking about previously.
That's good. Yeah, for our family, we like to use it, and like I mentioned, in family worship. And we, for full confession, we don't use the verses to memorize. We instead do fighter verses and memorize. But then we go to our North Star Catechism points, and it's just, I think, brings riveting discussion. Yeah, and I know some criticize the idea of catechism because with the idea of monotonous remembering things like a catechism point. But that in no way, shape, or form upholds the point of this. These, I feel like, are built towards family discussion. I mean, these are a springboard to some of our deepest family discussions. We don't want it to just be, are there more gods than one? No, there's only one true God. They're checked off. We're done. And it has to be, I think, like you said, so much more than that.
My child goes to a public school, magnet school that's incredibly multicultural, and has friends who are Hindu and friends who are Muslim, and so we get to questions about the Trinity, and immediately how does this relate to what your friend at school thinks about this? Have you ever had conversations about that? And these things come up with middle school kids, and so to be able to be dialoguing with her about that, so she knows what we believe as a family. She knows what the scriptures teach, what we're encouraging her to believe and root her life in. Like you said, it hopefully feeds that kind of dialogue.